we've got this here list of countries, a lovely little bar chart of countries by GDP nominal. And nominal just means like um, it's not been adjusted for PPP. It's not been adjusted for population, like capita. In fact, you can see here it says for countries by GDP per capita, see a different list. For countries by PPP, see a different list. So countries by GDP nominal just means total GDP, non-adjusted, no changes made, inflation not taken into account, population not taken into account, whatever PPP does not taken into account. And that's what we've got here in this data set. It's just a raw nominal total GDP. So we can see US GDP is number one, and it is 26.85 trillion. China is 19.37 trillion in number two, and then you've got Japan, Germany, India, UK, all with like similar 3 to 4 trillion economies. So I think what we want to just very quickly make sure we understand is that this basically means the income of everyone in the US. Like we don't know who gets the most, who gets the least. Probably Jeff Bezos gets the most, of course, but the everyone in the US combined makes $26.85 trillion per year, and everyone in China combined makes $19.37 trillion per year. That's basically what GDP is. So notice, of course, that we are measuring it in dollars consistently. Why would we kind of need to do that? Why are we measuring like Japan's economy in dollars instead of yen? Why are we measuring France's economy in dollars instead of euros? Answer in the chat, please. I can make sure people are paying attention. Reserve currency, universal currency. Yes, easier to compare. It's just all about the comparison. If like Germany was given in euros and US was given in dollars, that wouldn't tell us much because we then have to calculate how many dollars is a euro worth and then convert the German euro value to American dollar value, which would be really annoying. So what most charts are going to do is they're going to do it for you. They've converted every currency here into dollars, and then they're comparing that to the US. And yeah, the reason it's commonly dollars is because that's such a important currency internationally. So right, so if we look at this next chart, which is the list of countries by total GDP adjusted for this strange PPP thing, what do you think is the key thing you notice here? One key difference, I would say, is by and large same group of countries. But what's changed when we look at this PPP thing? Show them again. Non-adjusted, just raw GDP. So this is like the Excel table I showed you guys for 2023. PPP adjusted. Spot the difference. If this was a spot the difference thing on the back of a cereal packet, I don't know if they still do this in there anymore. When I was young, you'd always have like spot the difference stuff or like crossword on the back of the packet. All right, well done. So a lot of us saying China is now number one. I think the position of India is also quite interesting because looking at the first one, India number five, 3.74, comparable to sort of UK, Germany. But if we adjust for PPP, whilst a couple of other countries have an increase, like Japan's had quite a big one, Germany's had a mid-ish increase. India's actually had a massive increase, and in PPP terms, is twice the size of Japan, Germany, Russia. So Jay says PPP makes the high-performing country look bad, and that's exactly right. That's sort of what's happening here. We can see that these developing countries, and these are sort of the two most prominent, most dynamic developing countries, China and India. They're the two most likely like potential superpowers out of all the sort of developing or emerging economies. We can see that they in particular are looking a lot better in PPP terms than they do in nominal terms. And again, I think the difference for India is almost bigger than the difference for China there, actually. So that's very interesting. So why would that be? Why would it be that? And I'm trying to see if you guys can almost work out what PPP does here. Why would it be that, in some sense, places like China and India are actually very wealthy compared to places like America, Japan, Germany? What could that difference be? What could that factor be? I mean, if you read the Wikipedia page, you might be able to. Rishabh said, "Is it because of the population?" It's not because of the population. If you think about it, like with China and India, they would do a lot worse when we consider the population, because even though you've got, like, let's say China here, that's 33 trillion GDP, but that's being spread across like 1.4 billion people, whereas the US is spreading 27 odd trillion amongst much less people, like 300 million, something like that. Um, Purchasing power, there we go. A lot of people saying purchasing power, they are spot on. It is all about, it's cheaper to buy things in China and India. That's what PPP does. That's what this graph does, that the first one doesn't. This first graph, nominal GDP, ignores the cost of living, or what we could call the purchasing power of the consumers. So I think about how those two phrases relate, right? Cost of living, how expensive it is to live, and your purchasing power is like how much you can afford to buy. So in a country with a high cost of living, like the US, that's going to mean less purchasing power. But in a country where it's very cheap to live, where food is cheap, where energy is cheap, like China or India, even if the GDP is smaller, the purchasing power is going to be higher. That money is going to go very far because it's cheap to live. So you can't argue, and I think it makes these like kind of comparisons really interesting. Um, that GDP at PPP is a better way to measure living standards than just GDP. It's more important for us to look at this second chart than the first chart. Why would I say that? Like, why is it, if we want to measure like how well a country is doing, why is it better to look at PPP per capita? Niati says takes into account inflation. Rishi says takes the real value into account. Yeah, if effectively, yeah, it's if we think about like what it means to have a good standard of living, would you rather be a millionaire in a country where houses cost billions of pounds, or would you rather have £100,000 in a country where a house costs 20 quid? So obviously you'd rather be in the second country because you'd have a better standard of living, even though you earn less money. Because the cost of living's low, that money goes further. So someone living in that second country I've given an example of is probably richer in a sense, richer in terms of how much they can actually buy, what kind of life they can lead with what they can buy, than the person in the first country. So that's effectively what PPP does. So in that sense, it's pretty simple to understand, I think. What I'm going to do is give you guys like a very quick mathsy example of this. I haven't seen like PPP calculation questions in AQA. So this is not like something like we had before where I'd be like, well, you need to be really focused on this in case you get a multiple choice. But I think it's just useful to go through like a simple mathsy example just to help like understand the concept, I guess. So that's what we'll do. Let's say we've got the US and we've got China. Obviously, I'm going to make these numbers up because I don't know the exact US GDP. I just looked at it, didn't we? 27.84 trillion. Okay. So US, let's say their GDP, 10,000 per person, or 10,000 total. It doesn't actually matter here. And then China is, let's say, 5,000. So this is nominal, not adjusted for PPP. We would say an American or America is twice as rich as China based on this.
but let's say a sort of, I'm going to say a basket of goods. And that, by the way, is a basket. It's got like fruit, chocolate bar, shoes. That's a shoe. This is your basket of goods. Okay, and let's say this is it includes everything you need to live for like a week or a month or whatever. And let's say the average price of that basket is here is 200. And then the average price of the same basket of goods in China is 50. So I'll be quite impressed, but I'm going to put it to you. I can't be bothered to teach this really, so I'm just going to throw it over to you guys and see if any of you can work it out. Any idea what we might have to do here to adjust these figures for this difference in the cost of living? My only clue, but it is a big one, is that it's 4 times as cheap to live in China. It's a quarter of the cost to live in China. What might we do to China's GDP to adjust it for the cost of living? It's 4 times as cheap to live in. Jay says multiply by 4. Yash says multiply by 4. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, it is 4 times cheaper in China. Just in case you guys want to make notes, i.e. Cost of living is 1/4 times less. So what you can kind of think that means, or that indicates that $1 in China is worth 4 times more than $1 in the US. Which might sound like a weird thing to say. How can a dollar be worth more than a dollar? But all we're saying is it makes perfect sense if you think about the example I've given. If you have $200 in America, you can buy one basket of goods. And if you had $200 in China, you can buy four baskets of the same goods. So clearly having $200 in China is 4 times more valuable, or you can buy 4 times more with that amount of money than you can in America. So if we then do a PPP adjusted GDP, we're using dollars as our base currency. So obviously America doesn't change, but China would be 20,000. And this is basically what's happening in that chart I showed you, right? Is we're just they just calculate how much cheaper is it to live in China compared to the US. And then if it's half as cheaper, you multiply China's nominal GDP by 2. If it's a quarter as cheap, you multiply it by 4, etc., etc., etc. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, I've never seen a question that actually like tests that you can do this. It's AQA though, so you never know. But yeah, hopefully it's useful to sort of understand what's going on with GDP. But sorry, GDP at PPP.